So I want to welcome you to this METIS lecture, and I want to give a very special warm welcome to this year's speaker, Professor Katharina Zweig from Technical University, Kaiserslautern. We are so honored to have you here today. And as the METIS team, being Nadira Porta-Kaspati and me, we were quite amazed to see how many people are interested in this year's METIS lecture. We have people attending from all over Germany and all over the world. We are gathering here as students, researchers, gender equality and equal opportunities actors, as software engineers, managing directors, coordinators, people working in politics, and much more. I suppose we share an interest in today's topic, namely bias and discrimination in artificial intelligence, AI. Each of you has a different perspective on the subject, from general interest to researching a specific aspect of the topic. We probably have in common that we want to reflect on current technological developments, and we want to shape the society we live in to be more fair in the future. And this lecture and the space to reflect on that today is made possible by 20 research alliances from Humboldt-Universität to Berlin, as you can see here on the logos, teaming up in the METIS project to provide everyone with fresh news on gender equality and family friendliness in academia via the METIS website. When 6 research alliances founded METIS in 2018, they decided that its equal opportunities content, news and resources, best practice examples and interviews should be accessible to everyone. So please make use of these opportunities and check out our newsletter if you want to stay in contact. The coordination of the project lies at the Office of the Central Women's Representative of Humboldt-Universität zu Berlin, where the annual METIS lecture is one of the highlights of the year. So speaking of highlights, in the invitation, we announced that we would raffle seven copies of Professor Zweig's bestseller, Ein Algorithmus hat kein Taktgefühl, to the 2nd, 4th, 8th, and so on registered person. And by the way, it was this year's speaker who suggested using the powers of 2 to choose winners. So who has won the book, you may ask? I'm just going to read out the names. Those to the book winners, congratulations. We will contact you via email and send you the book. And as I was reading out names here, I just want to make sure to let you know that this part will be cut out from the recording afterwards due to data privacy. And finally, a brief reminder that you have Professor Zweig's handout and a pen ready so that you can participate in the exercise when the time comes. But now let me introduce Caroline Kunert, who is here in the place of the Central Women's Representative of Humboldt-Universität zu Berlin. She would like to welcome you as well. Dr. Ursula Vorig-Grubert, the Central Women's Representative, is unfortunately not able to attend due to unforeseen duties. So thank you all for joining the METIS lecture this afternoon. And Caroline Kunert, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Frese. Dear Professor Zweig, dear Professor Leser, dear guests and friends of METIS, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to the 2nd annual METIS lecture, which is made possible by 20 DFG research alliances working together within the METIS project. My name is Caroline Kunert, and I'm the Vice Central Women's Representative of Humboldt-University of Berlin. At Humboldt-University, the Caroline from Humboldt program represents all activities supporting and advancing gender equality. The program aims to strengthen women's academic careers from the undergraduate to the professorship level and creating a family-friendly work environment at the university. We do so by recruiting, retaining, and empowering women in academia by enhancing the visibility of women's achievement, as well as facilitating a good balance between family life and work or study. This afternoon, Professor Katharina Zweig will talk about artificial intelligence, fair algorithms, and discrimination. AI and algorithms are becoming increasingly relevant in many areas of our lives. But algorithms are not neutral. The reports of gender bias in algorithms are numerous. To list just a few: medical chatbots misdiagnose women's symptoms as panic attacks or depressions. Voice recognition systems often work less well for women. Algorithms used in hiring new employees deprioritize women's applications. Machine translations offers biased translations, and AI often erases or discriminates against trans and non-binary people with facial recognition systems programmed using the gender binary algorithms aiming to determine a person's gender based solely on their physical appearance. This concerns us greatly at the Office of the Central Women's Representative at Humboldt-Universität. It is clear that without fair algorithms and AI, there's no way we can achieve true gender equality, both within the university and outside of it. One component of the fight for gender equality in academia is promoting research that is free of, or at least reflective about, gender bias. Given the increasing role that artificial intelligence plays in various academic disciplines, the question of fair algorithms is one that affects research work far beyond computer science. From physics to medicine to the digital humanities, artificial intelligence and machine learning are increasingly used as central research tools. Thus, biased algorithms can lead to more biased research results in a variety of fields, and fairer algorithms can lead to more gender-sensible research. Another of the Central Women's Representative's central goals is to advocate for equal representation of all genders at Humboldt-Universität in academia more widely. While there is much work to be done for gender equality in all academic fields, it is widely known that STEAM fields exhibit a particular lack of gender diversity and other forms of diversity. This makes the fight for equal opportunities and gender equality in STEAM a particular focus of many equal opportunity efforts in academia. At the same time, studies such as Wong and Wheatmills show that the identity and background of the creator of an algorithm matters. Less diverse developers create less fair algorithms. This means that it is not only true that AI affects the fight for equal opportunities, but also that our equal opportunities work can significantly affect AI and move it towards a more fair and more inclusive outcomes in the future. For all of these reasons, I'm very much looking forward to a stimulating and insightful lecture and discussion this afternoon with Professor Zweig and with all of you. And I would like to thank Dr. Friese and Ms. Porter-Casparti for organizing this lecture. Ulf Lesser, Professor for Knowledge Management and Bioinformatics at Humboldt-Universität and spokesperson of METIS Partners CRC Fonda, will now introduce this year's lecture, Professor Dr. Katharina Zweig. Thank you all.
Okay, you hear the applause. You can't see it. So that was already quite a lot of introduction, but it's now also my honor to introduce our speaker today, Professor Katharina Zweig. I think she has a very remarkable career, and she took the long way to the topics that she will present on today. So she actually first studied biochemistry, which she finished in 2001. So she comes from an experimental subject, then took the 50% step to computer science and added a study in bioinformatics and obtained a master's degree in bioinformatics from the University of Tübingen. Then took the other 50% and did a dissertation in theoretical computer science. So from biochemistry, we are now in theoretical computer science on local behavior and global structures in the evolution of complex networks. That's actually a work that I know because complex networks play a very important role in bioinformatics, and we have at some stage worked in quite similar subjects. From that on, she redirected more and more into questions of ethics and the impact of computer science and AI on society. She became the head of the group on algorithm accountability in Kaiserslautern. I think that's the only and first group, at least in Germany, that's devoted to the subject. She does this for almost 10 years now. She was very active also outside academia. In 2016, she was a co-founder of Algorithm Watch, which is an NGO that watches the effects of algorithms on society. The work she's doing is also recognized by many other people. So in 2018, she was a member of the Enquete-Kommission Künstliche Intelligenz, Artificial Intelligence des Deutschen Bundestages. She is a co-founder of the Center for Ethics and the Digital Society at the Technical University in Kaiserslautern, and she won many prizes. She was a GI, Gesellschaft für Informatik Junior Fellow, and one of the 39 digitale Köpfe Deutschlands. So that was in 2000 and, please correct me, 18 or 19, when the German Ministry for Research put up a list on those people that are most influential in digitalization all over Germany. And I think it was a very deserved honor that she was one of these persons. Now, today her talk will be on computers say no, how discrimination can creep into AI. And I think that Frau Kudert already gave a quite nice introduction into the many problems that we might see when AI more and more takes over algorithmic decision making or computer supported decision making. I will only, so I skip most of what I wrote down here. I only want to remark from an historical point of view. Actually, at some stage, we thought that by using computers for supporting our decisions, we will be more objective. So that was the hope. If it's only numbers and calculations, there will be no personal bias and no discrimination anymore. But then we have seen it's not only numbers, somebody has to define the rules, or today somebody has to give the training samples, and these training samples and these rule definitions are prone to carry exactly all the things that we actually wanted to get rid of. But I think that nobody is better to explain this in more detail than Professor Zweig, and so I now hand over to you, and the stage is yours.
Thank you very much for this very nice introduction, and I'm very much looking forward to discuss with all of you. So let me give you my presentation. And we have something interactive, not only with a sheet of paper, but you might want to try. You should see now the screen of Katharina Zweig is shared, and next to that there's an option. And with that, you might be able to comment on my slides. We will try this out later. So computer says no. And so thank you very much, Ms. Kunert, for all your examples. I actually tried to find some new examples as well. So this is one example that I found that is at least debatable, right? So BioNTech is a household name today. It was founded by Dr. Özlem Türeci and Professor Dr. Uygur Şahin. Dr. Özlem actually leads the pharmaceutical development. And this is what Google knew about her in November 2020. So her husband is said to be the CEO of BioNTech, and she is his wife, and that's it. Of course, it was directly corrected by Google in the minute people saw it on Twitter. However, so Twitter is a nice source of all of these examples. There was another one that raised the question of whether there was discrimination by Apple Pay in handing out the credit limits on their devices. So this is the very angry rant. You might want to beat me over later. The Apple Card is such a fucking sexist program. My wife and I filed joint tax returns, live in a community property state, and have been married for a long time. Yet Apple's black box algorithm thinks I deserve 20 times the credit limit she does. No appeals work. And then a second one, I'm surprised that they even let her apply for a card without the signed approval of her spouse. I mean, can you really trust women with a credit card these days? And you can see that this raised quite a lot of emotions. So it got over 4,000 likes and was retweeted a lot. Moreover, the author is a software developer, so people took it seriously. And the NYC started a commission to find out whether women are discriminated by Apple Pay or not in 2020. So I would like to discuss with you, when is it okay that the computer says no? When is it not? And I think that this really directs to some fears we have about computers. So when we started into the already mentioned Enquete Commission on consulting the German Parliament, we got a very nice speech by the then president of the parliament, Dr. Schäuble, and he said in German, but that's the translation, artificial intelligence is seen by many as the new magic spell of technical progress. And then he went on to say what it will be able to do and what not. And he said, it will create poetry and it will reward and punish. And actually, I think these are the two fears most people have with respect to AI. And these are the questions I get over and over. The first one is, will I be replaced by a machine? And I think that is nicely captured by this statement that the AI will be able to create poetry. So is that really possible? And the second fear is, will it be judged? Should it make decisions about humans? And I think these are the two fears that we have to discuss about and be clear about it. So my lecture will be about so-called algorithmic decision-making systems, ADM systems for short. And that means that we have an algorithm at the core of the system. It takes humans as input and then scores them or classifies them. So if we were in presence now, I would ask you whether you find that intimidating if an algorithm scores or classifies you. And 2 years ago, I think 80% would have raised their hands and said yes. Today, only a few would say so. And I think we shouldn't be afraid per se of algorithms judging us. Actually, we know it already. In Germany, there's the so-called Schufa, which will give you a score on your creditworthiness. And that's absolutely important in a democracy and in an economic market, because if two people want to negotiate with each other, have a contract with each other, it is important that there is someone who guarantees that the other one is creditworthy. However, of course, we are not very happy that it's kind of a black box. Nonetheless, we know at least broadly what goes into it, and it feels like as if we had some control over it. So if you pay your credits, your score will become better. If you miss your payments, it will get worse. So I think if these three things come together, a transparency on the input, you have the feeling that you can control the input and the results, and you know what the thing is meant to be for, you know the societal goal, then it's kind of acceptable that there is an algorithm judging. Also in car insurances, we are used to being classified in different groups, paying a different money. And again, we have the same things. We have a basic transparency on what goes into it. We have it under our control, how our behavior is to get in a better position. And we know why this is necessary to have these car insurance classes. However, that is not necessarily the case with the AI we are talking about today. And so I was told, and I knew beforehand, that you would be a very interdisciplinary bunch. So I think it's very important that we discuss about words and meanings in the different communities. So I want to start with that. I've heard Dr. Frese say in her first words, the word bias. And I would assume that she identified it with discrimination, and discrimination with unlawful discrimination. So just be aware that in computer science, people might use or might have used these words in a totally different, very neutral meaning. So in computer science, the basic ingredients to do machine learning is actually bias. We need bias to be able to discriminate between groups. So if computer scientists talk about bias in a predictive statistical model, they most likely simply mean the difference between the predicted value and the real value. And whether this is semantically a good or a bad difference is not our cup of coffee. So bias in data may also simply mean a difference in some property that can be used to neutrally discriminate two groups from each other. Especially if you look at data science books before 2000, it's most likely that bias and discrimination are used in these absolutely neutral meanings without any semantics on that is bad, that is not something we should do. Of course, things have changed, which make it harder to understand what somebody is talking about. Today, the term bias in a model, even in CS, is mostly used as unlawful types of discrimination between groups. And the term bias in the data is also mostly used to denote data sets that show different impact of decisions towards sensitive group attributes or to those data that omits large parts of data about sensitive group attributes. So just be aware that the more you go back in time, that the publications might use these words much more neutral than we use them today. So, and actually this is something I do with my computer science students in their lecture on computer science and society, because rarely these students have looked into the legal grounds for discrimination, unlawful discrimination. So then I read with them Article 3, which is the equality before the law. It says that all persons shall be equal before the law. It's part of our Grundgesetz, basic law. Men and women shall have equal rights. The state shall promote the actual implementation of equal rights for women and men and take steps to eliminate disadvantages that now exist. And last but not least, no person shall be favored or disfavored because of sex, parentage, race, language, homeland and origin, faith or religious or political opinions. No person shall be disfavored because of disability. So that seems to be pretty clear, right? So, however, the law regulates activities of the state, of the government, and not so much the interactions between citizens. This is the first thing that my students normally don't know. And so on that, or in that sense, it's important to differentiate between discrimination, different treatment of groups, and unlawful discrimination. And that would be the arbitrary and or disproportionate disparate treatment, mainly by the state, of different groups based on sensitive attributes like religion, age, and ethnicity. So now I have some interactive thing for you to find out how you would decide. So I have 4 cases for you. For example, a bookstore in which men have no right to access. No man will be able to go into that bookstore. And now when you go to my, the screen by Katharina Zweig is now shared. Next to that, you should be able to have an options menu. And there you should see the commenting. Maybe I have to activate it.
Exactly.
So now you should see it in the options. It's a little pen, or it just says comment. So can somebody try, maybe one of the administrators, whether it already works? Yeah, I see it now. Okay, so now you can judge whether this is a discrimination, an unlawful discrimination, or whether it is not. So most of the people say it's no discrimination. Okay, So let's remove all of that and I go forward with my second example. The second example, I cannot see it myself, is sorry, but Zoom laid your videos on top of it. The second example, can you see it? No.
It's working perfectly.
Yeah, okay. So a doctor is fired from a Catholic hospital after he marries his second wife, and he was, of course, lawfully divorced from the first one, so it's not bigamy. Is that discrimination of being fired after you marry your second wife or not? And
you would have to
do it again. No, I think
the next slide would be good to see, because I think that's what you asked.
Yeah.
Next slide, and then we can see the case. And
so, do you see the case now?
now it's still the bookstore.
Wow. Ha, but now,
Yeah.
yes, thank you so much. So now I see the yes discriminations coming in. Some brave ones try with a no discrimination. Okay, so I'll give you the answers in a second. So remove all the comments, please. The third one is women paying more at the hairdresser, and we are talking about same hairstyle, right? So women paying more at the hairdresser because this is how it's been done for 50 years. Yes, discrimination. Okay. And now we have a fourth example. A person is not getting a job because of his overweight. Can this be discriminating, or is it not discriminating? Okay, so thank you very much for doing this with me. So let's go to the next slide. Actually, none of this is legally a discrimination. None of this. So it's totally okay to have a bookstore in which men have no right to access, and there are several of them. One of them was in Tübingen, where I studied. The Catholic hospital is allowed to fire this doctor by, this was a judgment. Women paying more at the hairdresser. This is actually a hairy case. So there was a study by Consumer Protection, and it basically said you should stop this practice. And it seems that society is not willing anymore to deal with that. So I think that very soon there will be clear rules that it will now be actually addressed. Yeah, so legally it is kind of a shaky ground. As long as there is no real difference between the hairstyles, there shouldn't be any different price with respect to the gender. But so far, nobody really cared and took care of it. But I think that will change in the near future. So we see that what we think is discrimination sometimes also gets into the law and back. But today it would at least not be prosecuted. So, and a person is not getting a job because of his overweight. So first of all, the overweight in and of itself is not a legal sensitive attribute. And second, in this case, it was a requirement to be fit and to be able to do things. And so that is totally okay if there's a good reason to not give this person the job. And that was also a judgment. So as you can see, this is really tricky, and we need legal scientists to actually educate us, computer scientists, but also all the others involved in what legally is an unlawful discrimination. And actually, Article 3 from the Basic Law can have an impact on contracts between persons as well, but not in these cases that I just introduced to you. There's also the so-called Allgemeines Gleichbehandlungsgesetz, the in short, Anti-Diskriminierungsgesetz, and in English, it's the General Act on Equal Treatment. And there, the state defines specific situations in which also in the contracts between two private citizens or groups or institutions, equal treatment is necessary. And I don't want to go into the details here, just to show you that it's mainly employment related. it's working conditions, that you can join a union, that you get social protection, including social security and healthcare, social advantages, and education. And last but not least, housing. So in these cases, the state also regulates the contracts between private parties. Okay, so that's the legal part. And then, of course, we have a philosophical treatment of these questions as well. And I only picked one of the many people that I could have cited here. It's Aristotle. And he differentiates between numerical equality and proportional equality, especially when rare resources are distributed. So the numerical equality approach would be that everyone gets the same. The proportional equality, there his stand is that it could be just and fair if we give out the rare resource proportional to some measured property to make sure that afterwards people are on the same footing. And what you already see here is that these two things cannot go together. You cannot follow the first principle and the second principle at the same time. So society has to decide when we are in these cases and when we are in that cases. Actually, Aristotle is often quoted to have said, treat equals equally and unequals unequally. This is not a sentence that I could find anywhere. However, it's good to have the summary in mind because basically he says there are situations in which we should treat all equally, and there are other cases in which we should treat people unequally, for example, to get them on the same footing after the resource is distributed. Okay, so this was our word explanation detour, and now we're coming back to algorithmic decision making. So we wanted to talk about algorithms, getting people as an input, and then scoring or classifying them. The question is, where does this algorithm get its decision rules from? And there are basically three different things. So either computer scientists invent the rules themselves. That is rare. In the 1960s to 80s, they would collect decision-making rules from experts, bring it into a form that was computer readable, but also remained human readable. These expert systems are still in use in some places, but they are not of our concern today because actually they're very much inspectable. If there is a rule that is discriminating, we would quite easily spot it. So the things we have to talk about is if these decision rules are learned by the machine. So how does the system learn from data? And this is our second interactive module. So today you will be my support vector machine. So please get your sheet ready, and I hope you have a ruler or something that is straight and a pen. And so actually we have some secret study running at TU Kaiserslautern, and we found out that it would be so easy to find out whether someone will become a criminal or not. You just have to measure two different hormones in the blood, which is criminolone and xanthosan. So, and you see the results of our preliminary study. That is all fake, of course. It's just a joke. And now you see that somehow the bad guys are above and the green guys are below. And your job is now to find a straight line that separates the two groups, the red ones, the squares and the green circles, as good as possible. So find a line between these two groups in any direction, but it needs to be a straight line so that these groups are best separated in your view. That means most of the red ones should be on one side and most of the green ones are on the other side. Yeah, it's actually very nice if you do it as a comment. So I see that some people are doing it now. Of course, it might change your view on it, but I think that's a nice idea. And you do see that people have very different opinions, right? Ah, nice. Haha. Okay. Yeah, that is very, very interesting to see it like this. Thank you very much for doing this with me. So a support vector machine is actually built for groups that are separable by those straight lines or planes. But in many cases, we don't have that data. In most cases, we have data that is messy and in which there's only a statistical correlation between input and the label, the outcome of it. And so support vector machines can deal with these cases. However, I gave you a clear order on what to do, and you came up with totally different ideas. So what happened here? What happened here is, so first of all, now if you had your line, if you had it on paper, then now you could check what you think of Miss Miller. So Miss Miller is a person that has 5.5 microliters of Sanftosan in her blood. That means on the x-axis, you need to go between 5 and 6. And then she has a level of 4 microliters on criminolone, and try to find this cross. And now you should be able to tell me whether with your line, this person is on the green side, so you expect her to be an innocent citizen, or whether she's on the red side. And maybe we can do it again. So just if you comment in the upper part of the diagram, you think she's on the red side. If you comment on the low part of the diagram, then you think she's an innocent person. Isn't there anyone who thinks she was a criminal? So I think there were some lines. Yeah, there must be some lines on the upper part. So, and this is what we normally get. We see that some people think she's on the innocent side and others think she's on the criminal side. And what you see here is that, so we take data from the past and actually from different persons than Miss Miller, then the method finds a separating line or any other kind of statistical rules. And after that, this rule is set and any new data point is measured against this rule. And of course, you notice that there is no perfect line, right? So you saw that whatever you do, you have at least one of the two problems. You either have malicious criminals who remains a malicious criminal who remains undetected, and or you have innocent citizens who are considered a criminal. And I might have been a bit more specific and tell you what you should try to optimize for. I could have said that, okay, we don't care, both kinds of errors are equally bad, then you could try to minimize the number of mistakes. However, even if I detailed the order to you a bit more, there would still be 3 different lines separating the two groups with only 4 mistakes. And for didactical reasons, Miss Miller is of course in the middle of it. So she would be, for one of these lines, she would be above, and for the other 2 lines, she would be below. And this is why most of you say she is on the green side. On the other hand, I've seen some very extreme lines, right? We had one line that was almost horizontal, very high above. How could that happen? So maybe this person would agree with William Blackstone, who is a philosopher of law. And in 760, he said, it is better that 10 guilty persons escape than that 1 innocent may suffer. So he would draw his line very straight and above. Dick Cheney, you might remember him. He was the 46th Vice President of the USA. And in an interview asked about the immorality of Guantanamo Bay, he said the following: I am more concerned with bad guys who got out and released than I am with a few that in fact were innocent. The few were 25%. So these two would put down their decision rules very differently. Mr. Blackstone would put it almost horizontally at the 6th line, and Mr. Cheney would put it down below to be sure that he got all of the bad guys. So of course, I'm preaching to the choir here. All of you know that these decisions are societal decisions and must be made by society. But what I want to convey here is, by telling the computer what to optimize for, we as computer scientists need to make a decision. So even if we use the standard solution would be both errors are equally bad. And I think for us as computer scientists, very often this doesn't feel as a decision. I made a decision about this. It's just the standard value that we get if we don't interfere with the system. So the important point here is what is to be optimized by artificial intelligence can be a societal decision. This decision should not be made by computer scientists alone. And we need to educate computer scientists that they make decisions of this kind whenever they choose even a default parameter setting. So machine learning is what we're talking about. It searches for statistical patterns in large sets of data from the past, and often from different individuals, to find decision rules for the future and future individuals. So in that sense, machine learning is a subset of methods called AI, and it is the type of methods that we are mainly talking about today. Yeah, and what we talk about here, I just brought a sample of different headlines, from viral conspiracies to exam fiascos. Algorithms come with serious side effects, how algorithms rule the world, how algorithms rule our working lives, digital dystopia, how algorithms punish the poor. And we heard some more examples by Ms. Kunert. What actually are these algorithms, and do they rule? Do they have any kind of actorship, really? So we need again to talk about words and meanings. The word algorithm is derived from the name of an Arabian mathematician called Al-Khwarizmi, and it means that you have a detailed instructions of data manipulations that provenly result in a solution to a well-defined mathematical problem in finite time. So let's unpack this. We need detailed instructions of data manipulations, of changing data. We need a proof that these detailed instructions actually do solve our problem. And before that, we need to have a well-defined mathematical problem. So I've brought you as an illustration a slide rule. With this, you can compute. It's similar to a calculator. However, you need to know how to input your data and how to read it from the slide rule. So somebody would give you a detailed instruction on how to input your data and how to read the output from this device. After that, you can apply it to any input. And that is the important part. So a recipe is not a good example for an algorithm, because with a recipe, you always get the same dish. Algorithms, the power of algorithms is that you get a detailed instruction once, and then you can solve the same problem for any 2 inputs or 3 inputs or 10 or whatever the problem is set. We might need to talk about data manipulation for a bit, because that again sounds negative, right? Well, there's a whole book on data manipulation with R. It's not a pejorative term in computer science. It just means that you change data in a specific way. So again, if you see some computer scientists talking about data manipulation, you have to ask whether he means it in a bad intentional way or just as a neutral term. So now let me give you an example for a detailed mathematical problem. The most famous one is the shortest path problem. You get a street map, and you know for each street how long it is, and you know which streets are connected to which other streets, and 2 locations, A and B. And then the problem asks, what is the lengthwise shortest path between them. So this is a well-defined mathematical problem. And Professor Dijkstra described an algorithm that provenly, for any map and any two locations A and B, finds the shortest path between the latter if it exists. So this is an algorithm. Now let's look at the not so well-defined mathematical problem of machine learning. So what do we get? We are given a set of data points, like our blood samples from the citizens. Each point consists of many properties. We often call them features. In our example, it would be the crinoline and the sanfloxan blood levels, and a class label. And that was the color, that was the criminal, or the square, red squares were the class label, and green circles were the other class label that says innocent citizen. Now, the problem with this setup is that we are now asked to find the following. A statistical model that best predicts the class labels of future data points. And this is what we did with Miss Miller. We asked, what is her class label likely to be? And we saw how differently we came up with solutions for that. And you also see that we had kind of two different steps in the process. So first of all, you looked at the data, then you found a line. And after you had the line, you just looked at the new data point and tried to find out whether it's on the lower part of it or on the upper part of it. So basically, there are two algorithms to judge them all, right? So you have the method from machine learning that gets data as an input. It looks out for certain kinds of patterns, and the support vector machine is really just one example of that. Then it creates the statistical model. In our case, it was a line, which would be a formula. It could also be a decision tree or a random forest, so many of these decision trees, or it could be a neural network. Once you have your decision patterns in this statistical model, new data comes in, and it is run through your statistical model and gives a result. And this latter part is a very, very simple algorithm. So let's look at it again. We have the method, it gets data, then the statistical model is built. And with a third very simple algorithm, we now produce the result based on new input data. So the question is, or the problem is, what do we talk about in media when we talk about the algorithm? So there is this algorithm in the third step, but somehow it's maybe not so interesting, right? So be actually aware, because most machine learning methods are only heuristics. What is the difference between a heuristics and an algorithm? An algorithm provenly gives you the right solution. A heuristics, and this is why I put up the labyrinth here. If you want to leave a labyrinth, there's a heuristic how you get out. You have the right-hand rule. You always have your hand on the right wall, and then you will provenly come out of the labyrinth. But you might take much longer than if you knew the shortest path. And so a heuristics gives you some solution, but you don't know how good it is. And remember, our machine learning problem is to best fit a statistical model to data. An algorithm would give you the best fit regarding some parameters, and some machine learning methods can do it, but most of them cannot. They can only give you some solution, and you don't know how far away it is from the best solution. So actually, we have not two algorithms to judge them all, but we have one heuristics, which in most cases is true. In very rare cases, it's an algorithm. And actually, the algorithm that gets the statistical model and new data This is what people get when they use AI. This is the part they see. And I think that this is the part that media talks about. However, the really interesting part is the heuristics that came up with the decision rules. So let me give you an intermediary summary. Machine learning is one type of AI that searches for statistical patterns in data of the past to make decisions in the future. The patterns are stored in the statistical model. We speak of the algorithm that computes the results given new data in the statistical model. However, the really interesting part is in the heuristics that creates the statistical model from the data and of course in the data. So now comes the question that is of most interest to you, namely the question of whether AI can be unfair and discriminating. And you already guessed it, we have to talk about words again. So what is fairness? The problem is that if you deal with computers and digitized information, everything you do needs to be representable by numbers. And fairness is a social construct. So we need to find a way to measure fairness so that we can compare systems in the way they are fair. And this is something that we call an operationalization. So an operationalization is a definition of how to measure a salient social construct. And most of the time, it is collapsed on a single scale. So afterwards, you would like to have something like, this system is 0.8 fair, and this system is 0.6 fair. So this is an operationalization. In CS, we have almost all of our measures of fairness, and there's about 20 plus of them, are based on the idea that we have to measure the disparate impact of wrong decisions, e.g., for example, on two groups. So we have the yellow guys here, and we would now ask whether the yellow guys up above the line come from a specific group of the population, and the ones below the line come from a different group of the population, because then it would feel unfair. Why are they wrongly classified in one way and the other group is wrongly classified in the other way? So it's important. The first question that I want to discuss with you, let's go back to here. It's very important to understand that we always need to get numbers to understand how fair a system is. We need to define how we get to these numbers. And most of the fairness measures, at least all of the ones I know, identify disparate impact as the one salient feature that needs to be measured. So can fairness even or unfairness even be arrived at if the machine doesn't even know that there are men and women? So if we just don't tell the machine who's who, then we should be fine, right? This is what Mr. Leser said earlier, that we should be able to be more fair. So let's get to our fake data set. And now we assign a gender to the data points and we split them up. And you see on the left hand that women tend to be more criminal with lower levels of criminolone than men. So there's a sensitivity difference in the two groups. This is all made up. Yeah, so if you don't like this example, make up your own, because for the computer, it doesn't matter what the semantics is. It would just see that the one group acts differently with respect to these attributes than the others. So if we wouldn't tell the computer about these two different groups, and this is what we did first, we wouldn't come up with the perfect split lines. We would do this intermediary line that now disfavors two men, because this line here in the middle is partly influenced by the females that react with a lower level of criminolone, and partly influenced by the men that react with a higher level of quinoline. And now some of the men are wrongly on the one side of this mixed decision rule, and 2 women are wrongly on the other side of this mixed decision rules. So it would have been much better to know that there are different gender groups and to train different artificial intelligence or machine learning models on these 2 sets. So no, we don't get objective and fair just because the computer doesn't know who's who. So fairness by unawareness is not a good idea. You should always know about the different groups, and it might not only be gender, but religion and ethnicity and others. So, but we have not yet really discussed what is fairness and how we measure it, despite the fact, besides the fact that it is disparate impact. So now bear with me. I have drawn some diagrams. So let's assume we have a population of people that are blue and yellow, just some property, we don't care. Our machine is now trying to differentiate between innocent people and criminals. Unfortunately, it's not perfect. It makes a mistake in 1 out of 5 people. And so there are innocent persons that are correctly identified, and there are innocent persons that are identified as criminals by the wrongly identified as criminals by the AI. On the other side of the line, we have the criminals. And again, the machine is doing its job not perfectly. However, it seems that our errors try to minimize the impact on the wrongly identified innocent persons, right? So this is why on the right-hand side, the algorithm is not as good as on the left. Is this fair or not? So one thing we could measure is whether within the 2 groups, within the innocent people and the criminals, the wrong detection rate is the same. So it doesn't matter whether you are blue or yellow, your chance of being false positively identified is the same among the innocent persons and among the criminals. And this is exactly what happens here. So now, let's now get the numbers. On the left-hand side, we have 5 out of 25 innocent persons that are incorrectly classified. That's the whole group. And from the 5 blue ones, it's exactly 1. And from the 15 yellow ones, it's 3. So for both of the 2 groups, it's the same so-called false positive rate. That seems to be fair. Now we can do the same with the criminals. And again, we see that over the whole group, 40% are incorrectly classified as innocent, and per group, that is the same. However, you really think that this is now all fine? I think you could have at least one other viewpoint of it. You might only want to concentrate on those people that are wrongly classified as criminals, because that is the worst case. So, and if you then only look at these 4 persons, you realize that 3 out of the 4 falsely classified innocent persons are yellow. But coming back to the whole population, yellow persons make up only 50% of the population. And this is now not a problem of low numbers, right? I could have blown it up, but it wouldn't have made the story easier to see. So it's not because there's low numbers and now we have 75%, which is almost 50% or something like that. It's a basic problem, and it comes because, as you can see, the yellow population is more innocent than the blue one. And I don't want to get in that discussions, why sometimes different groups have different criminality rates. Yeah, we know this for young men. We know this for certain groups. We know that some of them are just more prosecuted than others. So it doesn't matter where the disparate impact or the disparate behavior comes from. However, in this case, we will have different fairness measures, and one says everything is fine, and the other one says, well, actually, the problem of false positives is much more with one part of the population than with the other part of the population. So, and it gets worse. My system is a little bit slow. So the optimization of fairness given such a measure is actually difficult. I've just shown you two fairness measures of about 20 plus. In general, they cannot be optimized at the same time. You cannot try to minimize the impact for two or more of them at the same time. And the problem is that they follow from contradicting ideas about fairness in most data sets. And then what should we do? So which fairness measure should we choose? The summary of fairness is thus the following, and then I come to a small part and then I'm open for questions. So fairness in CS is identified with measuring disparate impact. And our basic idea of fairness is that fair AI is not discriminating and illegally discriminating AI is unfair. The question to the non-computer scientists, is this really so? Is it enough to measure disparate impact and to collapse very complex societal questions to one number? We also saw that an AI does not become fair by omitting all sensitive attributes. Fairness by unawareness does not work. We have seen that fairness measures are often based on different ethical perspectives. Think of Aristotle that said sometimes we want to have a numerical distribution of a rare good, and sometimes we want to have a proportional one. It can also be ideologies, and these can and likely will be conflicting. And here, it's not a computer scientist's problem. We need to discuss it socially. So, and last but not least, I want to ask a question that might seem contradictory. So, the idea of Aristotle was to create or treat unequals unequally. So my question to you is, can an unlawfully discriminating ADM system be used, meaningfully used? So let me introduce you to the so-called assistance system AMOS. So it partitionates the unemployed into three classes. Actually, there's two different machine learning systems involved. The first one tries to find out whether you will get a job anyway. Then you are in the green group. The second one tries to find out whether you're not likely to get any job at all in the future. And if you are in neither of these extreme cases, you are in the middle yellow group, and the state, the government will give you some help, for example, further education or similar things. So this sounds horrible, I think, to most of you. What I really like about this system is that they were extremely transparent about it. And I think that this is really something that can and should be used as a standard for all of these systems. So in the technical report, they stated what data they used, what method they used, the chosen quality and fairness measures. They also stated the values of these quality and fairness measures. And they publicly showed the resulting statistical model. In that case, it was a formula and very easy to interpret for any expert on this topic. So, and actually, it can be seen that this system is discriminating. So the technical report very clearly shows that elder people, women, and caregivers are assigned higher risks by the system. So you might rather be in the yellow or red group. And the question is now, is that a no-go for a system used by the state? And I and many others argue that basically what the system shows is a mirror of the job market. The job market is discriminating. AI is, of course, mirroring that. And the institution, which is a governmental private partnership, says that basically we use it to counterbalance that inequality. So we think that most women, most caregivers will come into this yellow block, and we can then give them all the scarce resources to help them to get back into the job. However, I haven't seen an evaluation of this system running and whether this is really the case, but I think the logic behind this is totally okay. So sometimes we need to use a discriminating system to counterbalance inequalities. And if you can prove that in the social process that uses this AI system, this counterbalance is actually taking place, then I think we can discuss about using it. Also, the developers, and this is also very interesting, the developers stated some rules for using this very simple AI. So, for example, they said classification must be discussed with the citizen in a face-to-face meeting, and the person can object. If he or she objects, we want to have some feedback on why this person thinks he or she is wrongly assigned to a class. And they also required that there always needs to be a human in the loop. Also here, I think this is a very good way of dealing with possibly problematic AI, and I think we should copy it for all of our systems. So what I told you today is that AI's decisions can be wrong in many ways. They can be based on the wrong data, incomplete data, or erroneous data. They can rely on correlations rather than causal relationships. This is why I call them algorithmically legitimated prejudice, and I think they should be tested before they are applied to humans. They make only statistical decisions, but very often they are interpreted binary. So Ms. Miller was kind of close to the definition, to the decision rule, and maybe we should have assigned her rather a distance to that decision rules and not a binary class label. They can be too bad to be used in a specific circumstance. They can be trained wrongly for a given application. They can wrongly discriminate. So there's a lot of things that can go wrong. And my take on it is that we do need to control ADM systems if they contain a learning or a learned component. Expert systems are inspectable. That makes decisions about humans or their belongings, or that gives access to limited resources. I think it needs to be done independent of whether there's a human in the loop or not, because very often the human in the loop is not actually making any real decisions anymore. And then we need to find out more about the logic and the mechanism of their decision making. And with that, I come to my final summary. Discrimination by AI is real. It emerges, for example, due to faulty or incomplete data that contains unlawful biases, or the wrong machine learning method, or by unawareness. But the problem is that this fairness is not really well defined. Yeah, we use one approach to measure it. So almost any group might find a fairness measure that points to disparate treatment in most cases for most data sets. So how do you deal with it? If this group says I'm treated unfairly and this group says I'm treated unfairly as well. Fairness measures are in many cases not compatible with each other. And actually it might not measure illegal discrimination, because the legal definition is somehow different than what we do in computer science. So I think that almost none of this is really new or unique to AI. We have dealt with these questions of fairness for ages. And this is why I would really like to send out a call for help, because computer science cannot solve the problem of wanted or unwanted, just and unjust discrimination alone. I think we could see the century of the combined intelligence of the humanities, of law, social sciences, and CS to really turn the world into a better place with the help of AI, or deciding that we don't want AI in a specific circumstance. So this is what I hope for, because there's only one way to get fairness into the computer, and this is by you, by me, and by us together. So I hope that you will help us to help AI make better decisions. Thank you very much.
All right, Thank you very much, Professor Zweig. And now, right, we are coming back to the plenum. Thank you very much for this engaging and insightful interactive lecture for a very interdisciplinary audience here for us. And let me tell you that I was intrigued to hear how different the definition of words is actually in computer science. And that I was, intrigued also by questions of fairness and actually by your call for help, which now I'm thinking about how we can actually respond to this. And I hope that our audience here has some ideas how to respond, because we are opening now the floor for questions and comments on Professor Zweig's talk. So if you want to pose a question, you can either use the hand raising tool on Zoom, or you can write a question in the chat. If you prefer to ask a question anonymously, you can write a private message to Nadira Potakaspati, and then she will read out your question to the group without saying names. This is also possible. So I see that Janis Steinke has a question for us. I'm very much looking forward to our question and answer part of this lecture. Janis.
Yeah, thanks very much. And also thanks very much, Katharina Zweig, for this very interesting lecture, because I'm actually a social scientist. And so your vocabulary was kind of new for me, but I have some concerns because I think you only presented the legal definition for discrimination and also the Aristotelian definition, which I think is not the one we should choose for, measuring the discrimination of AI, because in social sciences, there is this other definition, which I find quite more suitable, of discrimination that has to have 3 dimensions, the structural one, the institutional one, and the individual one. And this is not based on deductively raised categories. It is based on your own. I say for my own what I am, and not another person has the right to say, okay, you're a woman, or you're, what is even worse, your race. I mean, this is very problematic if someone else says, okay, this is your race, this is your race. I was in another talk the other day where I found out that still, I think in psychology, they use the term Caucasian race. And this stems from a very racist, and I think that stems from phrenology. And so what is my concern is if you use the definition of fairness as you presented it, it still depends on raising, for example, the gender of people, or you have to know the gender of the people, and then it's a quantitative measurement and not a qualitative measurement. And so I think we should, I don't know, because I'm not, I don't know much about information technology. I don't know how to practically do this, but I would like to ask you, do you have any ideas how to approach this problem? Because, for example, I think if you base it on the law, the UN Charter of Human Rights is totally Eurocentric. And so I think this is the problem, is to say, okay, this is a lawful discrimination and an unlawful discrimination. Even a lawful discrimination is not ethical.
Yeah, so when we started out, and I wanted to take you also on my journey. So we thought that discrimination in law is actually quite clear cut. And we thought that if a woman complains, I was not accepted by this employer, then they would look at statistics. So we learned in our journey that no, this is not the way that a judge looks at such a case. They need to have proof that somebody says, I don't hire Arabs, I don't hire women. So it's a totally different view to have the legal definition of discrimination and what we thought it would be. So, but nonetheless, computer science only looks at disparate impact, which would be a US-American view on it. They would look at these things. And what you said is now a totally different dimension. And this is what I said. Is it enough to look at discrimination just from the point of view of a disparate impact? And of course it's not. So, but I would say that most of the problems that you addressed, for example, the questions, is race something that we should use? That should come before we actually construct the AI. And this is where I would like to have the social discussion on, is this something that we need to incorporate? On the other hand, it's really dangerous to not do it, because as long as people assign you to race and treat you as such, it would be not helpful to not have this information. So it is really a hard problem. And the only thing I can say is, don't leave it to us. You need to get involved with your ideas to make sure that the AI we have in society is just and fair. And I think you have hundreds and decades of discussing this. And this discussion has not yet come into computer science, and we need to do it together. And I hope I laid the ground for this common discussion. I've seen that there was another question in the chat about different measures of fairness. So I could now tell you the 20 plus different names for it, but basically it's all combinations of these strongly identified people and grouping them in different ways. And they always have the problem of dealing with different views on fairness. So I think it would not be helpful to just have some more names on it here now.
All right. Are there any more? There are more questions, and I'm sure there are lots of questions. Prof. Leser, please.
I have a question. You essentially said expert systems are not so much of a concern because their rules are inspectable. I think that's the term that you used, inspectable. I was wondering what makes a rule inspectable and why is a decision tree not inspectable, which has perfect rules? Or why, in which sense, is a support vector machine, which at the end is a linear combination of certain weights, why is this less inspectable than a 5,000 rules deduction system? So, is there a border between inspectable and not?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. So at the moment, we are looking at decision trees. We're feeding these decision trees data that is created by a discriminating generator. So what we do is the following: we tell the system there's only one aspect about two groups. It's the salary. They have the same distribution of salary, but you give credit to one part of the population when they are above the median, and to the other part you only give the credit if it is above the median and 1.5 standard deviations away. And this is all the machine knows. So there's no hidden information that it might be okay to treat these two groups. It's a very simple fake data set. And the decision system would say that the very first and most important decision is the salary. And you can even tweak the algorithm with the stopping criteria that after that it would stop the discussion. So you wouldn't, although for a human, this rule is clearly discriminatory. For the outcome of the machine learning result would not be easily interpretable as such. And mathematically, so this is really easy. Yeah? You can compute it by hand, that the machine learning method makes just the right thing. However, the outcome is not easy to interpret for the human as a clearly discriminating procedure. So this really shattered my trust in the idea that these machine learning methods are easy to understand, because there's always this interaction between the data and the rule. So of course, if you have really, so there's a French system that computes your tax. and it has about 5,000 rules. It's made by experts, right? They just implemented the law. And I wouldn't say that this is inspectable per se, but as an expert in law, you should be able to find out this is paragraph 3 and this is the implementation of it. So in essence, I think expert systems are much less of a problem, let's state it like this, and not as binary as I said it in the talk.
So did you in a way say that a system is interpretable if every single rule, no, a system is less harmful if every single rule is not harmful?
No, I didn't. No, I don't think that I said so. So I think that in human systems that make decisions, errors are made. So judges make errors. What do we do to decrease or minimize the number of errors? First of all, we give them years of study and expertise. We choose the best to become judges. We give the persons who are criminals, prosecutors, a lot of ways to
appeal.
Yeah, no, to appeal. Yeah, thank you. With the wrong decision. So this is how we deal with error-prone systems. We make rules. We make the rules transparent. We give the people that judge a study. We choose the best ones to make the most important decisions, and we have appealing hierarchies. And none of that has yet been developed for AI. And the only thing we do today is we put a lot of data in there. We use heuristics, then we get out some decision rules that are kind of interpretable, some more than others. However, the interaction between data and the rules is really complicated and not easy to understand. And then we use them for future instances. And I think we're skipping all of the other steps that make our human decision-making systems much more robust. And I think we need to plug them in. That's the long answer.
All right. Another question? Another follow-up question?
So just a comment to add on this. So I totally agree, of course, but I mean, there's one property of computer-assisted decision-making, and that it's often happening in places where scalability prohibits human intervention. Mm-hmm. So computer-supported decision-making is done when you look at your recommendations in Spotify. And this is just not scalable that a human would look at this and they'd say, oh, I think there's not enough rap in it, or not enough songwriters, or not enough singers with people of color, or whatever. So it's something that's happening a million times every second. And this is a contrast to your example of a court with human lawyers, because they don't have to take these decisions all the time.
No, it's not. It just says that we as society decided that some decisions are important and others are not. And so there's not a big, you don't have to to get a big test on recommending books in a bookstore, right? Everyone can do it and say, I recommend this book to you. So we as humans decided that there are some decisions that are important, that are at the basis of our democracy. And of course, everything legal is part of that. But even there, we differentiate. Yeah, we have the small courts and the higher courts. And so I think that with AI, it's just the same. We need to understand when it's important and when it's not important. And the more important it is, the more robustness we need to build in. And at the moment, I don't see this robustness, and explainability of models is actually an overstated term, I think.
Okay, thank you very much. Since we are a very interdisciplinary audience, I would like to invite other perspectives on the talk from Professor Zweig, because this is surely not only a talk between people from computer science, because we are a lot of gender equality actors here, or even people who are actually designing algorithms, as our speaker herself. So please feel invited to share your view, to ask your question in the chat, or pose a question here on Zoom directly. So, because that is a question. Oh, Irina Gurevich, thank you so much.
Hello. Thank you very much for the great talk. I really enjoyed it. I have one kind of something between a question and a comment. I think we need to keep in mind that the values differ across different cultures and from country to country. So AI is operating in a ubiquitous manner worldwide, but different countries and cultures have different values. So many problems kind of supranational. Do you have any ideas how it is possible to regulate these things, or is the future like AI country-specific regulations?
So actually, we personally in the Algorithm Accountability Lab would like to see all accountability with the user of an AI system. So wherever this user operates, in whatever country this user operates in, he or she needs to oblige to the national law. And we think that this would, so of course, most companies don't want that, right? They want to buy an AI and then just give all of the accountability to the developers team and say, I don't know how this works. They sold it to me. So I think, yes, okay, you can do that, but then it needs to be part of your contract. So part of the contract then needs to be, I buy your AI system and you will be liable for any wrongdoing. And then I think the company on the other side would say, no, 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 I don't know how you use it. Yeah, even a discriminating system might be usable in some specific context, and in another context, you should better not use it. So the developer team cannot take on all the liability for how the user uses it. What I want to achieve is that these two parties need to negotiate under which circumstances this AI can be used and cannot be used, and then that each of the parties take responsibility for their part. So if the user uses it in a wrong setting, your problem. If it is used in the right setting, but it does something wrong, it might be the wrong of the software developers. I think that at the moment, we don't have this clear accountability. And this means that the developer teams have to sell their AI as cheap as possible, because actually it costs money and time to make the systems as good as possible. You need to find just the right data sets. You need to make a lot of tests, and this needs to be paid by someone. So this is our idea. We want to put all the accountability with the user of the AI, with the idea that they will then negotiate part of these responsibilities to the developer teams to enable a market in which good AI can cost more, because then the developer team is actually willing to take over liability for the use of these systems. And this would be our approach to also cultural differences, because then the user in that country is liable for using it in the social contexts where he or she can use it correctly.
Thank you.
We have actually two questions in this chat, so I would give priority to these two. Maybe Nadira, you want to just introduce the questions and then Professor Zweig can answer?
Yes, I'll just read them both out loud and then. So the first question is, as you mentioned, fairness is ultimately a causal concept. Do you think the more recent causal definitions of fairness shed some light on the problems you highlighted? And the second question is, can you tell us about current practices to ensure that the data that is used for training AI is not flawed in itself? For example, if you had an AI that assesses creditworthiness, if it were based on a sample of people that never had any debt, the predictions the AI would make based on that for the general public would be flawed. Are there any measures to ensure data sets are representative of the general public?
So I will have to ask the person MP to tell me more about causal concepts. It might be a different use of the wording, because I cannot bring these two things together. Fairness is the cause. So I need more information to answer that question. So let me go to the second one first. What I presented you with were machine learning methods that always need to have a class label, that is so-called supervised learning. So we couldn't deal with a data set that wouldn't know whether this person ever had a credit or not. However, there are methods that do not need to have that. Are there any measures to ensure data sets are representative of the general public? I think I can hand over this to sociologists and other people that deal with that. So this is definitely something that we are not trained as computer science, trained in as computer scientists, but there's knowledge about it. And there just needs to be time and money to actually check these data sets for these properties. And as long as we don't have a market for trustworthy AI, nobody will be willing to pay for it.
All right. Thank you so much for answering the second question. I just asked I just asked Marco if he wants to clarify on that. Let's just give him some time. Now, okay.
Hand raised.
Hand raised. I see, but we have a question that is open.
Yeah, but so I thought you might want to go back to counterfactuals. So counterfactuals ask what would need to be different so that I get into a different class, and I still cannot see how is that tied to causality. Yeah, so okay, I see. Yeah, you see that this is not the point that I read a lot about in the last month. So of course, we would like to understand which are the pivotal properties of a person that turn the classification into A or B. And with the ideas of Pearl, who tries to understand what is the causal relationship between the properties and the outcome, the class label that I want, you can then ask for so-called counterfactuals, and these are the properties that would need to be different so that the machine would come to a different conclusion, or that this causal model would come to a different conclusion. So would I think that these ideas about fairness shed some light on the problems I highlighted? So at least what I really like about Pearl's approach is that we now come much closer to scientific reasoning. So what I really don't understand well is how we can allow machines to deduce prejudice from data. And we as scientists would never be allowed to just use these ideas and hunches and intuitions about people, properties, and class labels. We would have to go back in our labs and single out single parameters to really find out whether there's a causal relationship or not. And Pearl uses this idea and says we first need to have this causal relationship model, and then we can try to learn from the data how strong each of these relationships is. And yes, so I'm much more happy as a natural scientist that he proposes this approach, and I think it would be one step of getting more robustness into the systems that are built. And we might not need it everywhere. Yeah, recommendations, maybe we don't need it, but especially when we talk about job interviews, application evaluation, job profile matching, and all of these sensitive areas, then we should take the time and actually find out what the causal structures are before we let them make decisions. Yes.
Thank you very much for answering a not very easy question. I think there was also an answer in the chat from Marco Pizzianini to...
Yeah, sorry for not being quicker of what you meant. Thank you very much for the second take.
Totally fine. The next question comes from Coco Bügel.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you again, Professor Zweig, for the talk. That was very interesting view. I wanted to come back to the question discussed before. So the what we discussed, the AI company selling its AI system to some user, and then the question whether this AI is fair or how to ensure it is fair and so on. And I wanted to ask, isn't this a question of like setting standards or setting norms inside the branche, inside the field of AI and AI development? And also connected with this question, do you think this is some realistical way, or this can realistically be achieved, that like inside the field of computer scientists, such kind of standard or norm can be put in practice?
So I'm quite sure computer scientists shouldn't be doing it only as a part of a larger team. So yesterday I was talking to Betriebsräte, to union workers, heads of unions, and I discussed with them when we or how we want to regulate AI in HR. So whenever you have job applicants, how good does your AI have to be in order to be useful? And again, we have the same ideas that it could be more objective and fair. And yes, it could. Yeah, no question. But my take on it would be sit down. So the employer should sit down with the union workers. And for this company, they should find out what kind of people do we want to have. If you want to have more people of the same education as you had before, AI might be really very, very suitable for you. If you do not want to have more of the same, but more diversity for whatever reasons, then AI is very likely not the right tool for you. What you can do then is just to use data science to see how diverse was my were my rules so far, and are they diverse enough? Do I have the people that I want to get? So there's always this last step that bugs me, right? Do data science as much as you can. Try to find out how humans make decisions. Try to find out how much they are actually objective and fair. And then you can, if you have your questions, if you have your measurements, you might be able to find out whether AI is able to help you in this specific setting. But if you don't sit down and ask these questions and do these measurements, how can you ever say that AI is now much more objectively and fair than humans? I think that human decision making needs to be the bar against which we measure the quality and fairness of the AI systems. And of course, we have these situations in which humans would not be able to do it, like in recommendation on a large scale. But then it doesn't matter anyway. Then you can just look at how many books you sell or anything else. But if it is a high-stake decision, if it is possible that it is an unlawful decision, then I think you need to make these quality-defining steps. But I think you can't do it for whole sectors. That is something that a company needs to do for themselves.
All right, thank you so much. We are going for some last questions now because we are reaching the end of our lectures. So please pose questions that you don't want to miss to have asked in the following minutes. And there's another question from Ali Taimouri. Please ask your question.
Thank you very much for the talk. That was great. My question is, I mean, you explained a little bit that how gathering data is basically so much dependent on the human decision making, for instance, in conceptualization and in operationalization. And a lot of the data.
At the moment, we can't hear you, unfortunately.
Oh.
That now is better.
Yeah. Okay. So a lot of the questions might not fall into the legal category. For instance, when the data is about population health, there is not so much that whether that's a legal sort of thing, kind of concept to see whether it's legal or not. And I wanted to see that where are the criteria in conceptualization and operationalization, which is not necessarily doing anything with the legal system, but it's more about social issues. And other strong and robust criteria to define for the data there. And the other question I remember in the graph you presented, so you mentioned that the model selection is based on heuristics. And I wanted to see if you can explain a little bit what those heuristics are that have been used to select the models.
Yeah, two different questions. So maybe I didn't get the first one correctly, but public health is still a problem that shows disparate impact. So in the US, there was an algorithm that decided which treatment you got. And based on the data that was kind of representative, but contained systemic discrimination, African Americans had trouble getting the right therapy. So I think it's enough to, no, it's not enough to look at disparate impact. I don't want this on tape, but it's not a counterexample for finding discrimination, but maybe I got your question wrong there. And the second one with the heuristics, so almost all of the more interesting machine learning methods are heuristics. So starting from logistic regression, decision trees, neural networks, support vector machines, none of those can be optimally solved. So basically we have linear regression. There you can do a best possible fit of the model to the data with respect to some quality measure. But for all the others, you don't know how far you are from the optimal statistical model. Did I get your first question wrong? I'm quite sure, right?
So I think regarding the second question, I think my understanding from heuristic is a little bit different. So heuristic in social science is more about cognitive biases. But,
no.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So heuristic just means a set of instructions that cannot guarantee you to give the optimal result. And in an algorithm actually has a proof with it, assigned to it, that guarantees you best possible solutions. So yes, heuristic should be on my list of words that need to be explained. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think with the first question, yeah, I was probably just thinking out loud a little bit, but it's more about sort of, being clear on the conceptualization and operationalization. I mean, the example you gave about the US, for instance, there was data showing that how there's more death in among African Americans because of corona, but then that's because they have more underlying disease, but then when you look at the underlying disease, there's more systematic discrimination that they develop the underlying disease. So there's a lot more problems with the how we operationalize particular concept, and then that's requires a little more kind of requires a little bit more kind of a social analysis.
Yeah, and basically, and this is new with respect to AI. I think the best way would be to train one AI for each of the different subpopulations. But do we actually want this? Do we want to have a treatment algorithm for Afro-Americans between 30 and 60, and then another one for whatever? Is this really where we want to go to? So now it would be possible, and it might even come out with the best decision making, but it has kind of other drawbacks. And this is something that I would really like to discuss with social scientists and humanities and philosophers, because with AI, we now have different opportunities and possibilities. We could train the statistical models for each of these groups that no single doctor would see enough of in his or her whole lifetime, right? So we could do it, but do we want it? Is that the way we want to go to? How would we prove that these are actually better for all of these subpopulations? So I think that these are the really interesting new questions. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. A whole bunch of new questions. So here comes a question from a gender equality perspective, which I would like to pose. Since you sent out a call for help, I would like to just briefly touch on this, because you said AI basically is in a way mirroring discriminations that are there in reality in the job market or wherever. It's just mirroring that via the data with which it's feed, so to say, or fed. And of course, from a gender equality perspective, that is not very satisfying to hear, in a way that we are reproducing discrimination, like, as you said, lawful discrimination or unlawful discrimination. And on the second hand, we are even reproducing discrimination in the sense that you said this word is used in computer science, that we are differentiating between different categories on the basis of gender, basically, which are reproducing binary norms, so to say. And even this kind of differentiation is maybe not that what we want to reproduce. But it's out there, you're right. So my question is, what do you think, where can we, from a gender equality perspective, as actors in the field, where can we actually contribute to this discussion of fair algorithms? Because it's difficult to see from our perspectives where there are points of contact between disciplines. So we can talk about interdisciplinary research projects, of course, but then as practitioners, it's difficult to find the point where we actually can feed our knowledge into. So to put it more drastically, does every AI company, for example, or companies producing AI or algorithms, do they actually need a gender equality officer or someone who is concerned with diversity to make sure that this perspective is integrated into the producing of algorithms? This is just one idea I had, but I'm curious about your ideas of working together in this endeavor.
So first of all, I have profited a lot from lots of discussions in the last years. For example, I learned that there is a theory of justice by Rawls, which was of course not in my syllabus when I studied computer science, where he actually said it might be okay to use the second best option as long as we are in an unjust world. So it might be okay to have a system that points us to discrimination and inequality, to be able to balance it out, right? So this was very reassuring for me that people have thought about it for a long time, and then they came up with the same idea that discrimination in the system is not necessarily a problem. It always depends on how you use it. So, and the second question is, so I'm booked a lot for talks in companies. And then when I say, okay, now let's get to the workbench and try to find out how we can get a lean software development process in which we take care of all of these problems, they say, well, this will cost. And then, no, we don't have money for that. So this is why I think it's so important that we change the economics of this game. This is why I want to put accountability to the final user of the system. And then he or she wants to get rid of this. And so we have a market now for better AI. So this is my solution. If we have that market, all of these specialists will be necessary. However, from the people that study anything in these realms, these experts, I often get that they are very wary of mathematics. And they need to come a little bit closer to us as well, because if we want to build these systems, we need to have numbers. So don't be afraid of the numbers, but you can ask as many questions as you want to really understand what these numbers mean. And it would also help if we wouldn't have to discuss everything on anecdotes, right? We need to find the bigger picture. And very often, if I'm in a discussion, then someone says, yeah, but this person, that is also an unequal treatment, and this person. So we have to find a middle ground in which we accept that for computer scientists, or if we want to use these systems, it's all about groups. And if we don't come together on that point, it will be very difficult. So first of all, we need to change the economic market so that people like you can be paid for it. No, really, right? So there needs to be money for it in this. And then we need to have people that are trained in statistics, in math, even from the social science, that are not afraid of it, that understand that the idea of computer scientists. And we did it kind of the other way. So we have a new field of study called socioinformatics, where we do the same thing from the other side. These people have a software engineering study. And on top of that, they know how people from different fields of study think and what kind of questions are concerning them. So we need to find this middle ground and the money.
Thank you so much for these very concrete ideas. So I'm up to that. Unless there are not questions left here in the audience, or comments, of course, are also welcome.
And I can hand out the slides and you can distribute them among all the people you want, but they have 120 MBs because of all the pictures in it. So yeah, we'll find a way to distribute it.
We'll find a way. All right. Okay. Then let me just say once again, Professor Zweig, thank you so much for your lecture, for your energy and your passion for the topic as well. And the intriguing questions that are connected to it. Thank you very much. And let's just give a big applause for this, for your time in lecture.
Thank you very much. I love being here.
Pleasure is ours as well. And of course, I would like to thank our audience for joining us, for posing these questions, for developing the topic with us, and for helping us think and reflect on this development that's taking place at the moment and that we want to tackle. I'm not going into the details of our discussions, but I think we have identified problems in terms of algorithm methods, the data and statistical models, and even in terms of words and definitions. And I think all of us will continue reflecting on these problems and making our way with this topic. Last but not least, I would like to thank the METIS partner for making this lecture possible, and for making METIS possible as the website project, you know. So I hope you feel as inspired as I am right now from this lecture and discussion. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much, everyone.